Hello friends, and welcome of you with this new video of our course PostgreSQL and Flutter. First, I would like to thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you subscribe to my channel to support me to keep these free videos coming. Second, I'll tell you that all the code for this video will be uploaded to my GitHub on this link, Flutter with PostgreSQL using model class. So I'm hoping today or tomorrow I will upload the entire code, so you can, if you wish to see the code, the entire code, then you can see it in this link. Okay, having said that, now let's dive into the details of our video. Remember, in the previous video we spoke about the registration when we created a register pages for the buyer and for the seller. We created two pages, one for the buyer and one for the seller. We didn't create any users at that time, so now we will create a buyer and we will create a seller, and then we start the process of logging in, and we will see how we can do the code for the login. Okay, so this is our database, and you can see here we have nothing so far in our database, nothing is saved in our table. So let's start creating first a buyer. We can give whatever names in here, whatever details. So buyer at buyer.com, and we can ASAD. This is a password. We do the registration, and registration successful, and next let's checking it in our database. Okay, this is the buyer have been registered now, all the details about the buyer. Okay, now let's do a seller. Oh, sorry, pardon me. Let's do a seller. So for the seller, the email first, we will go with the email, seller at seller.com, any password and any number. Okay, registration successful. Let's check it in our database. Okay, the register is done, and this is a seller. As you can see, is seller. This is true. Okay, now let's start with the login process. Well, the first thing first comes, let's do the code. So this is a login.dart page code. When we press on this, of course, as we have said in the main, we will go to the login page. So this navigation, this route, the login, will take us to the login class, which is in this login.dart file. So this is the login class. It's a very simple design, just an app bar and then a login page class here in the body. Now here in the login body, this is a stateful widget, of course, because there are states changing in this case. So we need to create a global key. A global key, we will use it with the form by the name of login form key, and then we need to create two controllers for each text editor, and then we need to create two methods. This method will keep track of any changes that happens in each and every text field. That's what we have done previously before. And then we need to initialize this text field with the controller.addListener, and then we need to dispose this text field data whenever we finish our work with the text field, and then we start the design of the page. Now I will not go through the design because this is out of the scope of this course. What's important for me is here is this piece, which related to the database. So whenever a user enter details in here, the email and the password, now we need to do one thing. once he pressed on the login, first of all, we need to check that both text fields have been filled with data. So this is the objective of this validate, as we have spoken in previous video. First, we will validate that both or all text fields have been filled with data. Otherwise, if they are not filled, then we will give a notation to the user that please fill all details through a scaffold messenger, and the scaffold will give us a snack bar, and this snack bar will tell the user fill all details. This in case the validation failed and some of the text fields are empty, but if all the text fields have been filled with data, then this will be validated and then will be saved. Now let's start with taking the procedure of checking or querying the details that the user have entered here. Now the second thing we need to think about is that we need to distinguish between a buyer and a seller, since we have created two distinct accounts, one for a buyer and one for a seller. So how we will know that this user who just logged in is a buyer, and how we will know that the other user is a seller. Now this process, we will talk about it. First of all, we take these values from the text fields the user have entered, which comes from this method, as we have spoken, the method that tracks all the changes with the text field, and we pass them to the model class. This model class will have a login method by the name user login model, which takes two arguments, which are the details from these two text fields, and then we will pass them into another method. This method is in the app database class. So this method, the login user method, available in the app database class, and also we will pass these two arguments, these two values into as an arguments for this method. Now this login user method, now of course we will get a feature from this, a string feature from this method, and that we will send it back again as a login feature to this login page. Now once the login model pass these details to the app database, we will go to the login user method, which takes, as I have said, two arguments, the email and the password, and it returns a future string. This future string will pass to the module, and from the module will pass to the login page. So let's start checking the database. First, we need to do a try catch. This is a very good thing to do it, a try catch, in case anything went wrong. So we can go and catch an exception, and by catching an exception, we said we return a feature by exc. You could select whichever string this will be passed to the module, and from the module to the login page. And in here we have few options. One of the options is that if we have an exe, if we get an exe feature, in this case the scaffold will give us a snack bar, and the snack bar will tell the user that something went wrong. This to represent that if there is any exception happened while the process of querying the database. So now we open a connection, we do the transaction, we give it a name here. So let's change the name if you wish, or you could use another name, any other name, or login con, and you can just change it in here as well, login con. Okay, first thing is that we need to check that this user email, is it registered in our database or no. Whenever any user wishes to log in to an account, we need to make sure that this user already registered with our database, and this can be done with this simple query that we select the email, the password, and the is seller. Now this will affect us later, not now, but in general we need to check if this email, which we have taken from here, from this value that we have taken from the user who entered this value, So we need to check, is this email registered with us or no? So this query will tell us a result, a login result. In this result, if the login is registered, then this user can enter to the application. Otherwise, if it is not registered, then we will return a future with the string by the name of not. This will be passed to the module and then to the login page, and here if it is not, then we show a scaffold with snack bar and says email not registered. Now this is the second case. Now this case, if the user is not registered. Now what if the user is registered? In this case, if the user is registered, then we start checking the credentials the user have entered, the email and the password. Now there is a step before that. For some applications that uses in the registration, they use an expiration date for those users who are subscribing to in the application. So the user have a subscription, and this subscription have an expiry time. So we need to check whether this user is within the time limit of his subscription. If it is, then we let him into the application. If it is expired, if the subscription expired, then we tell him that your subscription has expired and you have no right to log into your account. Now this, I will not go through it. I will not put the code in this case because it contains mathematical details to calculate the timing of the login and the timing of the expiration date. So I will not put the code related to that because it will complicate the things, and I'm trying my best to keep the things simple. But for those of you who are designing an application which consists of subscription and expiration date, they can contact me and I will give them the other version which consists of the expiration date, how we can calculate it and how we can see if the user, when he or she logged in, is within the time limit of his subscription. So now let's check the user email and the password. First thing, forget about these things, we'll talk about the next video when we do the update. We have three things when the user entered the email and the password. Either both are correct or one of them is wrong, or the password is wrong. So here we need to check the email and the is seller option. As you can see here in the query, we retrieved three things: the email and the password and the is seller DB, which is available in here in our cat. Is seller DB says that this user is a seller. This user is a seller. So we need to make sure that when the user enters his credentials here, we need to make sure that is this user a buyer or is it a seller, because the buyer has a page, a different design of a page, and the seller has a different design of a page. So we need to make sure, we need to realize this user, is it a buyer or a seller? And the way to do that is by checking the password and the is seller. The is seller. Now we take the login result, we take this result which contains these three parameters and we check them. This one, since it is a list, so this one number 0, number 1, the password is number 1, and the is seller DB number 2. So here the result dot first, the element 1, which is the password, and we compare it to the password that have been entered by the user in here. Of course, we get this password from here. Okay, so we check the login result at element number 1, and we check it with the password that the user have entered. If it is true, then we check the other thing, which is user, is seller. The second thing is seller. If it is true also, which means that this user is a seller. So we return a future with a string future with some word in it. I choose to say sell, abbreviation of seller. So this future will be returned to the module, and from the module will be to the login page. And in this case, we will check the future. If it contains sell, that means we will be redirected. We will navigate to the seller account. The seller account in the main. The seller account in the main will take us to the seller account class in the seller page. Now, if the password have been checked correct, but the is seller is false, that means this user is not a seller, this user is a buyer. And in this case, we will return a future by writing by, a string future, and this will be passed to the module and then to the login, in this case buyer account. Buyer account route will take us to the buyer account class, which is in the buyer account page, which we will talk about in the next video. Otherwise, the third option, if the password have failed, so if the user entered a wrong password, in this case we will return the future with fail, which means it's failed. So this thing will be returned to the module and to the login, and in this case we will have a fail option, which will give us a scaffold with snack bar, and it says login failed, wrong email or password. So this is the steps that will be taken to verify that this user, first of all, email is registered. Second, is it a buyer or is it a seller? And third, that the password is correct. Now there is another case, as we have spoken, if it is an exception. If it's an exception happen for whatever reason, then we will return a future with this string to the module and then to the login, and we will show a message if we have an exception for whatever reason, which, as I said, it is something wrong, something went wrong. So this is the entire process. Now let's try these things. Let's log in. So buyer at, let's try each one. Buyer.net. As you remember, the email is for the buyer is buyer@buyer.com, and we give it a correct password, and let's see what will happen. So now we are entering a wrong email. Email not registered, which means this email is not registered. Now, second case, buyer, we will type a correct email but wrong password. Wrong password. So correct email, registered email, but wrong password. Okay, login failed, wrong email or password. So far so good. Now let's enter both correct, buyer@buyer.com, and the correct password. Okay, so now we have entered to the buyer section page. Now the system have recognized that this is a buyer, and therefore directed us to this page. This is a special page for the buyers. Now we will talk about in the next video, pardon me. But this is the page only for the buyers. And when we logged in, we checked, is this user is a buyer or a seller? It turns that this is a buyer, so it directed us to this page of a buyer. Now let's try a seller. Now, as you can see here from the database, The difference between both is that seller DB in the buyer is false, in the seller is true. And this is the difference, and this is what will make difference between the login process in both cases. So seller at seller.com, and let's say ASAD1122. Let's log in. Okay, as you can see here, this is a page of a seller. How we redirect it? Because the system checked. When it checked, it saw that seller is true, and therefore it redirected us to the seller page, which is a different design, a totally different class from the buyer class. This is how we can create a login, and we can manipulate how we do with the login. Now again, for those of you who have an application which have a subscription, and they require that to enter in here to calculate the date of the subscription and when it expires, please contact me so I can give you the other version, which consists of the code that related to calculating the expiry of an account. Okay, now this is the end of this video, the login video. I hope if you like it, please don't hesitate to put a like, and to support me, please. I'll be grateful if you subscribe to my channel. Now in the next video we will talk about these pages, the account pages of the update of buyer details and seller details. Thank you very much.